So today I'm going to be showing you how to use the statistical menu on the Casio 9750 calculator. But the good news is that if you have a CG50 or a 9860, it's the same steps, same menus, and so whatever I show you here would be applicable to those calculators as well. So what I have in front of me is the emulator on my computer of the 9750, and you'll notice it has its nice menu items. If you have the other calculators, one of the main differences is the size of the screen and maybe color for CG50. Over on my right, I have an activity that I'm working on, which is called life expectancy, which is in one of our one of Casio's free online resources. It's a sampler fostering, and I'll provide the link below in the description. But basically I'm going to be entering the data from this table, which is showing different countries and the overall life expectancy total, the male life expectancy and the female life expectancy. And we're going to then look at how do you use a calculator to show different plots of this data and have students look at multiple representations, make decisions about which ones are the best. So today I'm going to show you how to do the histogram and also how to do box plots. But as we're doing this, you'll also see how easy it is to choose different types of plots. So the first thing you want to do is actually enter your data. So we're going to go into the stats menu option. So I'm just going to arrow over here, hit execute, and notice that I have a list, and the list, I can leave it as list 1, list 2, list 3, but I could also arrow up, and this allows me to actually type in description. So if you look here, my overall life, male life, female, I could define it that way. So let's put the cap lock on. So notice here's my alpha, and I'm going to hit the shift and then the alpha to lock that. And now I'm going to just, let's type in overall. So OV, and I'm just using the letters up above. I'm just going to make it short for us here. So and then hit execute when you're done. And then if I arrow over, I can arrow up and do the same thing over here. So I'm going to turn the alpha lock on again, and this time I'm going to type in male. So MALE, hit execute when I'm done. And lastly, the females. So turn on the alpha lock, shift alpha, and then spell female here. So FEMALE. And execute. So now all I've done is labeled my columns, my lists. They now have some descriptors that match my data. And now I can start entering. Now I'm not going to spend a lot of time entering all of them for you. I'll speed up through that, but let's just go through the first process. So I basically want to enter the numbers in this list. So to enter a number, I make sure I'm in the right list, and I type in what I see. So I have 82.6. And when I hit enter, it's going to enter that value, execute, into that list, and then it moves automatically to the next one. So then I can continue to enter these, there we go, and hit execute every time you're done. And so you would just continue that all the way down. If you're on a computer like I am, this is the emulator, I can actually use the number keys, and I'm going to do that in a minute really quick. But then to get to the other columns, you just use your right arrow and arrow up and start there. So I'm going to now just kind of be quiet while I'm typing, and we're going to speed through this so that we can enter all of our data. Okay, so we're done entering our data, and if you want to just double check, you can scroll up to the top and kind of go through them all, make sure you didn't make any mistakes. So now I have all my data, and now I'm ready to look at what kind of graphs. How do I compare the data? What kind of things can I glean from this information? So I have 3 sets of data, and so I want to graph them. So you'll notice along the bottom in statistics, you have choices. You can do some calculations, some different types of tests, since this is statistics, but we're going to do graphs. So when I hit graph, notice my options. I can actually make up to 3 different graphs in the statistical menu, and we're going to actually make a graph for each list, right? Because right now we're going to focus on histograms. So the first thing I want to do is set the graphs up. So I'm going to hit, everything is kind of menu operated here, so set is right above F6. So notice, here's my 3 graphs again. So I'm in statistical graph 1. We want to arrow down and change the type of graph we're making. So notice here's my choices. I can do a scatter plot, an XY plot, pi. If I choose F6, see the little arrow here, I have histogram, box plot, bar plot, and distribution. So lots of options. So right now we want a histogram. So I'm going to select F1 since that is the function underneath histogram. So notice the graph now changed to a histogram and my choices are less. First it asked me what list. So we do want graph 1 to be the histogram of list 1. And so that one looks good. So when you are finished in a specific menu option, if you hit exit, it takes you back to where you were before. So now I want to set up the graphs for 2 and 3 or list 2 and list 3. So I'm going to go back into set, choose F6, and notice down here at the bottom, it's still on graph 1. Well, now I'm going to change it to graph 2 so I can set that one up. So notice up here we have graph 2. Now I have my options again. So let's arrow down and choose histograms. So remember you have to hit F6 here. That's under the arrow. And choose F1 for histogram. And so now I have my histogram. But notice the list is not matching. So I want, for graph 2, I want to use list 2. So when I arrow down to list, I get this option here. And when I hit it, it's going to basically ask me to enter a number. So now I want list 2. So when I hit 2 and execute, now my list for graph 2 is coming from list 2. Exit again, takes me back to my screen. So let's do one more setup for this last graph. And again, I want this time graph 3. And graph 3, we're going to arrow down. We're going to choose histogram again. And this time I need it to be list 3. So I will arrow down, choose list, and type in 3. So what I've done is, let's hit exit to get out. I've set up the 3 graphs. And I can now graph them individually, or I can graph them together. But this section right here where it says select, let's decide what we want. If I just want one graph on, or 2 or 3, I have to either choose on or off. So right now the only graph that's on is graph 1. So if I choose draw, it's going to ask me, where do you want to start? That makes sense. What's your width? Let's keep it like that. That's an auto, makes sense. We'll hit execute. And here is my histogram of graph 1. And remember, list 1 was the overall expectancy of life expectancy in these different countries. I could hit shift trace and kind of arrow through and see what those different numbers are. What's this tallest bar? That's 77.64. So that country that's there there's the most in that particular stat. There's 7, right? So there's different countries that have a pretty high life expectancy in that area. So then when I hit exit again, remember it takes me back here. So we're back to where we started, and now instead of seeing just one graph, let's say I want to see more than one. Maybe I want to see all 3 of them and make some comparisons that way. So now I'm going to go to select and turn on the other graphs that we're not on. So all I have to do is arrow down, and notice I can turn on and off by selecting F1 or F2. So let's turn it on, F1, and it's going to do the same thing. It's going to ask me, where do you want to start? We're just going to go with the default and hit execute. And here is my histogram with all 3. So notice it's a little interesting. The bars, and it's harder to tell here with the smaller bars, but the larger bars actually have 3 different kind of horizontal lines. And so when we do trace, I want you to see what happens. Is as I move, it's telling me that this line that they're on is coming from graph 1. But let's say I'm on this bar here. It's sort of at the bottom of the bar. If I arrow up, a little higher I can't see, but here, this is from graph 2. So this is the male expectancy. So males overall have, in this particular setting of 3, I have a higher male than compared to female in this particular range, right? So let's go over to this higher one here. So this is, again, males have a higher in this particular range that we're looking at, and women, their graph 3, have a lower one in this particular range, or there's less women is how we should probably think about that. So I compare them this way. So the question then becomes, is a histogram a good representation of this data? If I want to do all three, it's a little confusing right now on the calculator. Now, obviously, that has to do with window size. So let's go back. We're going to hit exit, takes us back, and let's change the type of graph. Maybe it would look a little bit easier to compare things if I change the type of graph. So set is, again, how you change the graph. And we're on graph 1. It's currently a histogram. Let's arrow down. And this time, let's look at, and I'm going to hit the F6 to go to other options. Let's look at a box plot. So notice box is above the F2, so I hit F2. And it's, again, checking where do you want your data to come from. We still want list 1 for graph 1. And do you want the outliers on or off? So I'm going to choose on, because there might be some outliers that make a big difference. So then hit exit, and let's do the same thing. Let's set up the other two graphs. So graph 2, I want to change it. So F6, I'm going to choose F2 for box plot. I want to arrow down. The list is correct, and I want the outliers to be on. And then we'll hit exit, and one more time we're going to set up the third graph and choose graph 3, F3, arrow down, F6 to choose more options. I want F2 for box plot, narrow down, and turn on my outliners. So exit to get back, and now I'm ready to graph. So let's see what we want. Let's select. I want them all to be on, because now I can compare the 3 different box plots. So when I hit draw, you're going to see all 3 of the box plots. And this is a little more visually appealing and a little more informative than the histogram was when I had all 3 of them together, right? And again, Shift Trace allows me to look at each graph individually. So here's graph 1, which we know is the overall life expectancy. And I can see as I arrow over to the key values here that my 5-number summary, quartile 1 is 73, the median life expectancy for overall in every country is 78. Well, let's compare that, say, to the median of men, which is 75, and the median of women, which is higher, right? So you can do a lot more analysis, or it's easier to see and compare if I'm using a box plot. So then students can explore the different plots. All you have to do is go to exit and set and have them explore different types of plots. There's lots of options here. As you can see when I hit F6, we can do lots and lots of different types of plots from our lists and our data. So this is a really nice way. Once they've entered the data, they can easily and quickly explore different representations of the data, which ones are going to give you the most information, which ones should we use, how can we use them to compare, those types of questions. So have fun exploring, and again, these steps work on all of the graphing calculators from Casio. The difference being size of the screen, color, that type of thing.